Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are, what you're doing, what time you're listening. Welcome back to SuperParents, a podcast for young and old parents alike. I'm Paula Howard, your host, and we're glad to have you back. Today, we have a very special guest, special to me. As you might have guessed by her last name, I have a very close relationship and have had a close relationship for as far back as I can remember with her. Paula Howard. How are you doing today, Paula Howard?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
We're honored to have you. She is a parent and teacher. She's been my parent and teacher, as a matter of fact. And so I thought it would be cool to have her on today. We've been discussing structure in parenting, and we've talked about three areas of structure. We've talked about structure in daily living, in technology use, and in discipline. Those are the big three areas we've kind of talked about. And so I wanted to kind of get your opinion and your experience and whatever advice you might be able to offer in those three areas. First of all, why don't you go ahead and set us up with your background? I know I mentioned you being a mom and a teacher. Tell us a little bit about your motherhood and your teacherhood.
Okay. I have 4 children. Silas, my oldest, Simeon, next to the oldest, Seth, and then our daughter, number 4. So when my oldest was very young, I decided that I wanted to homeschool. I had been involved with Christian education much of my life, and so I was very confident that it would be something I would enjoy and benefit. My children would benefit from it. So I started him as in kindergarten, and then as the others got old enough to start school, they followed along, and I homeschooled them from kindergarten up through up until their high school years. So it is something I really enjoyed, and I feel like they did very well with it, and were very smart, easy to learn, and I learned a lot. They learned a lot, and it was something fun, and it was an adventure every day. But I did treat it like school from the very beginning. When I started the oldest in school, we had a school room where we would go to school. So as far as structure goes with homeschooling, I would, get them up. We would eat breakfast, a good healthy breakfast, and then begin school in a schoolroom set aside for just school work. And so basically they would go to school, and we kept it structured like that. And on the homeschool part, it was very beneficial to have it structured. They knew they were going to school. We called it going to school. And so we had break times. We had a lunchtime set aside. So when it wasn't break or lunch, we were in our desk, busy working, and they all did very well. And I feel like that the reason they excelled in their education is because of the structure that I implemented with homeschool. One of my children told me recently, one of my grown children said that we did not homeschool. We did private school at home because we treated it like school. And so I feel like the structure part of it was a big benefit for their learning.
Yes, I agree with that. When you were talking about homeschooling, it came to my mind. I know homeschooling has been picking up on popularity in recent years, but it seems to me, and I'm kind of relying on personal anecdotes here, but it seems to me that a lot of the make or break success with homeschooling comes from whether or not the parent is able to provide consistency and structure and provide an experience that they would get in a private or public school setting. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but from my own experience and from how you just talked about it, it sounds like structure was literally kind of the
foundation.
It's what allowed it to succeed, basically.
Yes. It was. I feel like I know there's a lot of different ways to homeschool, but for me, I wanted it like school, and I think that that is the way homeschool should be done in some form. You may not have a room, but I think it should be set aside, time set aside, and even curriculum. We used a curriculum that was tried and true. And so I wanted to make sure that they learned what they were supposed to be learning on every grade level. And when we did the standardized testing, they would be far advanced and excelling. So I felt very, very good about the way they were learning, and it was easier on me as a teacher and a mom to have a structure, and we had a time out for school so that we had evenings where we weren't in school all day. We were in school like school hours. And the structure for a parent, it would also, you don't want it to always be teacher student relation when you're homeschooling. You want it to also have time for parent child relation. So we did that, and it was very, very rewarding to me as a parent to be able to watch my children learn and grow and be with them. I did not have to be away from them and work out of the home. So I benefited from it greatly, being able to watch them at every stage in their life. And I do feel like structure was key.
So yeah, all right. So we've been talking about sort of three areas, and I want to get a little bit more of your background because, as I mentioned, you still are teaching, but as we kind of go on, I want us all to kind of be aware, and I like to keep reestablishing what exactly we mean when we just say structure, because structure can kind of be a really broad and all-encompassing word. And so, kind of what we're talking about with structure, and I know we've been covering those three areas, which is daily living, technology, and discipline. These are kind of big areas in a child's life, and I felt like those were kind of the three we would like to focus on. But what we mean by structure is basically the rules and boundaries and expectations that a parent is setting within those areas. That's kind of how we're defining structure, just so we're a little bit clearer on the definition. I want to ask you to go a little bit further in your background. For the past few years, you've been teaching at a Christian school. Is that correct?
Yes.
Has that been similar or different from your homeschooling / parenting experience, and how has that changed any of your perspective on setting structure and boundaries in place?
Yes, I really enjoyed teaching at the Christian school, but it really solidifies the structure idea, because even when it's not your own children, when it's children in a classroom, the more structure you have as far as them knowing the rules and what they're going to be required to do, or even the rewards that they'll receive for good behavior. And it's foundational for any classroom setting, whether it's homeschool or a Christian school, that they know their guidelines and that they're expected to stay within their guidelines, but also rewarded when they do. And the day flows more smoothly, and everybody is happier. I think overall in life, people are happy when they know what's expected of them and they can fulfill their expectations and feel like that they've accomplished something and they've been successful at something. The feeling of success and accomplishment in a child is very important in building their confidence. They just little things that when they feel like they've accomplished a small task, they've got one subject accomplished and they did well at it, just that feeling of success and accomplishment that goes with their school. Their school is their job. They're growing into adults, and as they get to adulthood, they're going to have to know how to accomplish small tasks. And so structure and just keeping them focused on what they're supposed to be doing. And it's hands-on for a teacher, but it's so much easier when the students understand what you expect of them and help them to follow through.
Yes, I agree. We've been touching on that quite a bit with, we talked kind of generally about how parent-child relationships when it's healthy, can produce sort of a healthy independence in a child. It produces self-confidence. They tend to be a little bit more responsible. So we've kind of been talking about that kind of structure and those expectations and boundaries, setting that child up for success when it comes to being able to be independent or successful outside of the home and in school or work situations or whatever. Let me ask you this, because we've been kind of heavy on structure, and I want to keep it balanced. What would you say the difference is between healthy structure and toxic control?
Yeah. You need some kind of control to have structure, but to be overbearing with control and oversee every part of your child's life is not very wise, because a child needs to learn to be creative and have its time where it thinks on its own and it's not fearful and with so much control. You have to have control to a certain measure, but the child also needs free time and needs to be independent, an independent thinker, and just playing with their toys. And just like with my children, the boys all like to play with Legos, and they were very creative with the Legos. They would build and then take it apart and build something else. So free time, unstructured, is also healthy. So you do need structure when you're raising children, or if you're homeschooling, or if you're classroom. But as a parent, there needs to be times where the child can think independently and be creative, and also learn how to coexist with their siblings, without a parent always right over them with total control. So you need control. You have to have control. You have to have structure, but there is a healthy balance where they have, they have their child time, that they have energy and playfulness that God put in them, and they need that to be healthy. They need to be free to develop with free time, also not always having control.
Let me add to that, and I'm not disagreeing, but I want to point something out. You called it unstructured free time, but I would argue that, and it sounds like this is kind of the situation that you had. When you have healthy structure and you're very clear about that structure, and you have expectations and boundaries, and again, you're clear about those expectations and boundaries, even the time where you're letting that kid kind of go on his own and learn whatever and gain independence and think creatively and problem solve on their own, even though you're not interfering or you're not imposing structure, there is still structure there, because and this just goes back to healthy foundational structure. You've already established healthy boundaries, expectations, and things that the child understands that are clear. And so really props to you for that, because that, even though it is kind of unstructured free time, really it's structured.
It is
free time.
Yes, because there's boundaries. There's always boundaries in life. Whether you're a child or an adult, everybody has boundaries. And so the child knows, they're not going to tear the house up. They're not going to go do something crazy. They know that even in their free time, yes, there is structure and there's boundaries in life. But as long as they stay within those boundaries, they are happy and they're able to function freely. So there is freedom in boundaries and structure.
Yes, I completely agree. I want to kind of move quickly through these three areas that we've been talking about, because I want to hear sort of your thoughts specific to those three areas. And so the first one we've been talking about is daily living. And we've talked sort of about how that can be chores, bedtimes, and meal times. And then even when you were talking about homeschooling, you talked about how you had an established time for school, an established time for breaks and meals. Can you kind of walk us through maybe what a day would look like, but more so, what kind of structure were you implementing in daily living, like in way of chores and bedtimes, meal time, school time, break time, those kind of things?
Yes. Well, like I said earlier, that, as the children were school age, we would get up. The ones that were school age, I would make sure they were up and dressed and had a healthy breakfast and in their desk doing their schoolwork. I was right there helping them with their schoolwork. And then lunchtime would come. We'd have a break, and then lunch, and we all had lunch together. And that was a kind of a free time where we could talk and, uh, have a good time together, sharing our day or sharing thoughts. And then we would go back to school for the amount of time we needed to finish our. But in our homeschool, we set daily goals. So each child set their goals, and I helped them. And as they accomplished those goals, they would be able to mark that off, that was accomplished. That was a task that was done. So they'd go to the next thing. And so as the children would get done with their goals for the day, they would be able to enjoy maybe some games or some kind of fun structure time till everyone was through with school. And then my children like to play outside when the weather was pretty. A lot of times we'd have time outside, and I would always try to have supper where our whole family would eat a meal together in the evenings. Of course, there were exceptions to that, but the norm in our family was to eat our supper meal together. And that also was a time for all of us sharing. And then at nighttime, when it came time getting close to going to bed, they would get their baths, and they knew the process. Everybody knew that they had to take turns getting their baths, and then they would get a storybook. We would have story time where one of my husband or I would read to them, and then after that, they knew the process. Then we would all, after sharing a little bit together, we would all pray, have a devotion. We'd read our Bible and pray, and then everybody knew it was bedtime. And so just the structure and everybody knowing what was expected, what was coming next. Everyone went to bed without fussing, or they was just happy because it was just life, and they knew what came next, and everybody was, I think, healthy. We had healthy relationships with our children.
Yes. Okay. I want to kind of hone in on two things you brought up here. One is what you basically just said. What we've kind of seen and what we've been talking about is that when a child understands what's coming next or the expectations and understands the structure of their daily life, they're in a way deep down subconsciously, and this is what's happening in their development and everything, but they're able to literally relax.
Mm-hmm.
And with that relaxation and trusting their environment, it opens them up to I don't know exactly how to put it, except that it opens them up to a more real experience, where they're able to encounter their world very freely without worries and underlying fears or anything, because they know what to expect. There's been consistency, and like you said, that is just about the most healthy thing that I can think of and that I've seen in parenting. And the other thing that you mentioned, and this keeps coming up, it seems, we've also been talking about self-efficacy with goal setting and expectations, where the child has independence and they have self-confidence that they're able to do things on their own. And you just brought up a lot of that with the goal setting that you were doing in your homeschool. And for the sake of practicality, not everyone listening to this might be homeschooling, but I do want you to consider that there's quite a benefit in being able to promote self-efficacy with goal setting. And that could be a chore chart where everybody knows what's expected of them and they're able to complete that. But you can also, I've seen different kind of hobbies promoted and rewarded, like writing book reports or something of that nature. And really, I like it because a lot of times the child learns to set realistic goals for themselves, and they learn a lot of independence and self-efficacy with that goal setting. And so again, props to you. It seems that you've been able to easily promote that in your life. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that before we move on?
Yes, the chores, I did not cover that, but you did ask me about that a while ago. And the chores, I felt like that it was healthy for them to have chores. They were very small chores. I did the most part of the work around the house, but every child needs to feel like that, they're a part of a team. And so I felt like the smaller children had small chores, the older children had bigger chores, but I never wanted to lay too much work on them, especially in school days when school was like their job, their work. But, I was, always wanted them to do some of the chores around the house. So we tried to have, for a long period of time, we had a chore chart. Everybody knew what their trash day was, what their, dusting the house, or what part of the house, or the restrooms to clean. So I think chores also are very important, and they're part of like the goal setting and accomplishing a small task, just the feeling of accomplishing a small task and feeling like you've been successful at something. I never wanted my children to be stressed or worried. About the only thing they needed to be worried about was just making sure they stayed within their boundaries and, stayed within the structure. But as far as them having to worry, I wanted them to be, happy and free of worry. And you said something about that. And I know that when the child stays within their boundaries, they should, and they're doing what's expected of them, they should not have worry or stress as a child. Of course, a test coming up is going to be stressful. That kind of stuff is unavoidable. But for a parent, I feel like it's very important for parents to try not to stress their children or worry their children.
Yes, I agree. Kind of moving on into the second of the three areas that we've been talking about. And this one's, all these you could argue are touchy, but we're going to get a little touchier and touchier as we move on. The next one is technology and technology use. And this one is, I know there are a lot of varying opinions. Some people withhold technology completely, some allow it for reward, and some are a little bit looser with how they, what they allow with technology and whatever. And I think there are probably benefits to maybe all three approaches. I think something that keeps coming up here, and the important thing to keep in mind, especially for young parents, is that in a lot of this, balance is so key. You don't want to lean too far in either direction, really. But I understand that can be kind of hard to achieve, especially if you're just starting out. But in terms of technology use, are there any, and this is opinion, and I want to know your opinion. So don't worry about stepping on toes. This is an opinion-based podcast. What kind of structures maybe do you think are important, or even did you implement when it comes to technology use? Now, that might be boundaries, time limits, rewards, guidelines, healthy habits. Is there anything you could say here to sort of give us an example of how maybe you approached technology in your household, or even at school?
Yes.
By the way.
Well, technology is good. In many, many ways, technology is good, and you don't want to withhold technology from.
I'm sorry. I want to be really clear and make sure I'm defining what I'm saying, because I don't want it to be just a kind of an abstract term I'm throwing around. What I mean by technology, specifically in parenting, is video games, personal devices. Maybe that's an iPad, maybe that's a cell phone. But those two are the big ones. There are probably more that I'm not thinking of, but personal devices is in iPads, phones, and then video games. Because technology is a very broad term. I understand that. And I want to just be clear what we're talking about. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
That's fine.
But
the video games, we allowed our children to play certain video games. Now, there are definitely boundaries with video games, non-violent video games, but just video games in, wholesome, they're fine for children to play. But in my experience was when I would allow my children to play for too long and they had been on the video games for a lengthy period of time, their behavior, they would become irritable. And I think the stress just of the video game, the intensity of the video game would cause them to, become irritable with each other. And I would, anytime I saw that or realized they'd been on too long, I would make them turn it off, go outside, do something different. So I think even a good thing, you can, it could turn into something bad. But as far as children playing video games, I don't think that it is harmful if they're not consumed with video games. I feel like this is my opinion, but being outdoors and learning to play with other children is probably more healthy than video games. Just playing in the dirt, playing on your bike or skateboard, or being in the sunshine, um, just being outdoors, or even if it's in the house, but just playing on something besides devices is probably more important. But video games are not all bad, and so I feel like it should be structured and limited with time. That's my experience and my observation and experience, that video games are fine, but it needs to be, of course, it has to be the right kind of video games, but not too long of a period of time. They need a break from it, and they need to learn how to interact with people and do something different, for their energy also, because energy and movement is so important to health. So when you're playing a video game, you're not getting exercise. So there's a balance. It's nothing wrong with playing video games, but there also needs to be a balance where you're playing with other things and you're doing other things.
Yes. And I will say this sort of to the audience. You might completely disagree with that, and that is an opinion. And I welcome that. The idea here is to give you sort of, a real world example of a parent and how she has approached these things, so that you kind of can get different perspectives. And I mean, truthfully, if you disagree, I would like to hear that. Please do comment or send in feedback. I would love to hear your disagreement there, because technology is a very touchy subject. It's also a lot of the technology that we're using now is relatively new, and we're still kind of navigating it. So we welcome any of those kinds of opinions. But the idea that we're kind of pushing here is that regardless of your specific opinions on, video game good or video game bad or whatever you want to say, that structure, expectations, boundaries, those are what's important, not necessarily exactly what you're promoting. Mm-hmm. What about in the classroom? Is there anything you could add there? I mean, I don't want to, I might sound a little opinionated even asking this question, but I do want to go ahead and say, what about, have you seen differences in behaviors with children who you would maybe be able to guess, or maybe that they have not had structure and they kind of had free reign with the kind of technologies we're talking about, versus when a child has had healthy boundaries and expectations? I know you mentioned a little bit about behavior. Have you seen, and this would be personal anecdote, but I know you're a teacher, you encounter or you interact with children all the time. What can you say about behavioral differences?
Yes, I can detect when a child has been having unlimited access to technology. They are they're not really good at interacting with other children. They become awkward when they are just totally consumed with video games or technology of some kind, their devices. And that in our world is becoming more prevalent. And it takes from a parent, a teacher at a school really can't make those rules for a student with their home life. But as a teacher, you see the differences in behavior with children that are healthy, interacting with each other, versus the ones that are consumed. It's very easy to detect when a child is being consumed with video games and technology. Their grades show it. Their habits as far as staying awake in class, or interacting with, answering questions, or being alert, and they're just not on, in my opinion, they're not like the ones that get a good night's sleep. They're not on their technology at night, and they, know how to talk to people. They're not awkward, people that are have a variety of things in their life, whether it's playing outside, playing board games, or just talking to a friend, But there are people that I've seen that they had much rather be playing on their device than saying any word to any human. And there's a big behavioral difference. Yes.
Okay. And I know I keep clarifying this, but I want to just make it clear. We're not necessarily attacking technology here.
No.
The reason that I chose this area is because, well, let me say there are a lot of areas in a child's life where they can overindulge and kind of get out of balance. And so it's not necessarily that technology is bad, but technology is a pretty common area where children or homes maybe do lack structure. And so technology is kind of an easy place that parents kind of just can let slip up. And so it's not that we're attacking technology, and I don't want it to come across that way. It's more so that we're saying this is an area where, generally speaking, from what we've seen, there's arguably a lack of structure. And so that's kind of why I've picked technology. It's not because I have any I don't have specific beef with technology, but I am saying that is an area where it seems to me it's not too uncommon for children to have a lack of structure in their lives. The last area, and this is basically the touchiest, and so we can sort of talk about it and still avoid really ruffling feathers, or maybe we can ruffle feathers. It's an opinion podcast. But discipline, and we kind of talked about structure versus control, and that's kind of shows up more so in discipline, maybe, than any of these other areas. I know you kind of talked about structure is more so giving the child a framework wherein they can sort of make mistakes maybe and learn consequences, but also learn to be independent and meet expectations and such. So you can kind of take this wherever you want to, really. You could talk about classroom or parenting. How can you have balance in a sensitive area like discipline?
Yes. For children, they have to know there's consequences for bad actions. And it's left up to parents and teachers what those bad consequences are. There has to be consequences for misbehavior or bad actions. That is what brings control and structure. So whatever a parent chooses and what really works for them and what they're comfortable with as far as the consequences, the main thing that I would say for whatever you decide, whatever, if it's time out or if it's taking your favorite toy or if it's, restriction, anything like that, it has to be consistent. And especially in the formative years of children, they have to have consistency with rules. If you tell them, this is what's going to happen if you do this, and then that doesn't happen when they misbehave, when they've messed up and nothing happens, no consequences. Well, they learn that very quickly. And then the parent becomes distraught because they've lost control. They don't have the structure they need. And their lives become very difficult when you have children. The more children you have, whether it's in a class or a parent, and you have no structure and no control, you are in chaos. And so following through, you have the rules and you let them know, if you do that, you're not going to get that toy. You're not going to get to go with your friend. You're not going to, get to go outside. Some kind of, some form of discipline for misbehavior. And if you're consistent and faithful with following through, you have to follow through. If you promise it, you have to keep your promise. Or the child will learn that they'll be out of control. The structure will be lost if you're inconsistent. Now, as a parent or a teacher, we're not always perfect, and there are times that something slips through the cracks. But overall, if it does, and you're consistent and you're faithful, and with discipline and following through, your child knows that. And then when something does slip by, they know, they got by, but they know that next time they're probably not going to get by, if it's not the norm. So that's the key to me. That's the key. Whatever a parent decides to be the discipline and form of action for misbehavior, they have to be consistent. Can they change that form of? Yes, they can implement several different kinds of actions, for misbehavior and consequences. Uh, Different things can be, especially as a child grows, what worked with a toddler will not work with a teenager. So you have to modify the form of discipline. But if you do it while they're early, and you set the precedence while they're young, is what I meant. If you do it when they're young and in their formative years, and they know that you are going to, this is as a parent, you're going to follow through and you're going to keep your word, but they also get rewarded when they are well behaved. You have a healthy relationship and you have control, and usually as the child gets older, they just know, what to do, what not to do, and you don't have to be a hard discipline with them, because you've taught them while they were young. The key is to teach them while they're young, if you're a parent, and also to be consistent, and follow through with whatever you tell them.
Yes, I agree. Sort of one more question on that, and we'll wrap up. But uh, from what I've seen is a lot of young parents are usually one of the bigger worries is that too much discipline is going to be harmful to their relationship. They're scared of maybe they're scared of going overboard with it. The main pushback I've seen is that discipline harms the parent-child relationship. How would you respond to that?
Well, I have two ways of looking at it, because as I was growing up, my parents had rules that, and discipline. And so it did not harm my relationship with my parents. I knew that I had to obey, and I didn't even question that. And so as I got to be a older teenager and young adult, I was, my parents were like my best friends. So from that perspective, as a child, looking to my parents, and they were very firm on consequences if we did wrong. So, but they were loving, and that's the other key that's very important, is love. You do it out of love. So if you do it out of love, you're not going to harm your child. The child's going to know that you love them, and you're doing it for their benefit because you love them. So from a child looking to my parents, I had a healthy relationship with my parents all through my life. But as I got to be older, they were like my best friends. And I always thought that if I had children, that's the kind of relationship that I would want with my children. So I based a lot of what I did with my children on the way my parents treated me. And I knew my parents loved me. And I knew I loved my children. And I treated my children much the way I was treated when I was being raised. Now, all my boys are, grown adults, and I feel like that we have a very healthy relationship. We're like friends, and it's exactly what I was hoping for. And so I feel like you're better for it to discipline. I think it harms the relationship, and the child loses respect for the parent that doesn't discipline them out of love. You have to do it out of love. But you love your child to a point where you want them to grow up to be healthy adults. That's what you're working toward, for them to be healthy adults. And so if you don't discipline your child, they will be wild. They won't understand what true love is. True love, has boundaries. Whether it's our love for God, we have boundaries with our love for God. We also have love, and we love our spouse. We have boundaries. We're just not wild when you get married. So love has boundaries. And if a child grows up without boundaries, they're going to be a wild child and grow up to be a wild adult. And they probably will not even have a relationship with a parent that doesn't discipline them. It could be harmful. I would think it would be more harmful for a parent not to discipline their child, because the child won't understand love and relationships like they should.
Okay, I like that. I think the important thing to take from that is that love at the base of all that is crucial. Love, that true love would shine through. Yeah, I like that, because even when discipline may not seem like, obviously in most circumstances the child's not going to be in love with discipline, but in the long run, if you're balanced and loving when you're providing it, I think that pays off. I heard a wise man once say, "Don't raise a child that you wouldn't want to be around." And so, the thing that keeps coming up is basically consistency and expectations, all those things being clear and balance. Yeah, and I like that you've kind of. This is a good place to wrap up. I like that you've kind of capped it off with that love. I mean, come on, that's incredibly important in a parenting situation. You can't really have a healthy relationship without love at the core.
Right.
And so I like that we're kind of ending on that note. I really appreciate you coming on today, kind of providing us with a different perspective. Is there anything else, any practical advice, any ideas you can leave our listeners with, any teachers or parents that might be listening? Anything you want to say?
Well, just like the last thing you said, is if the foundation of everything you do is out of love. And, there were times that when my children were little, I did not know for sure what to do. So you don't always have the answers. And sometimes we make mistakes. Parents make mistakes. Teachers make mistakes. But if you have the foundation of love behind everything you do, and you have the love of God in your heart, you realize your mistakes. And you also, I was prayerful that God would help me to be wise, because there were times I did not know for sure what to do. And so I feel like that when you love your child and you're doing your very best, that there's a higher power that makes up the differences and the gaps that you may have, because we're human and we do have mistakes. We do make mistakes. No parent's perfect. So if you're just doing the very best you can and you love your child and you want them to grow up to be an adult that's functional and, highly confident, then you're going to try your best and let God make up the differences.
I like it. I don't mind ending on the note of love. Thank you again so much for coming on. I know you're a little bit busy. You're a full-time parent, a full-time teacher still. And so I really do appreciate your time. Thank you for being open and sharing your own experience with us. I hope that you've been able to take some idea, some application, or some inspiration from what Ms. Howard has said to us here today, and that you can apply it in your own experience. The idea of this podcast, is providing you with things that are practical, things that you can apply in your own parenting experience, young and old parents alike. You're never too old to learn any of those things. Anyway, I greatly appreciate you for coming on. I appreciate y'all for listening. Hopefully you'll be back next week. And as always, please do leave feedback. Please comment. Please leave pushback. We like to hear opinions and perspectives. That's what we're all about here. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm Paula Howard, and I'll see you next week.